What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. Lots to get to, but first and foremost, I would like to remind you all to please subscribe to us and support us wherever you're consuming us. YouTube, hit sub and like, especially if you're watching now. Help the algorithm love us back. Comments help as well. Apple, 5-star ratings and reviews help us out a ton, and subscribe on Spotify as well. If you've done all those things, hey, tell your friends, acquaintances, coworkers, any randos on social media about us. Shout us out on Twitter. You could retweet our promos. That comes as a big help too. Anything. Join our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. And finally, it is live. I'll eventually promote it on social media, but the link is in the YouTube description. It will be in the podcast description. We have merch. I'm wearing one of said merch. We've updated the designs a little bit, so you'll see HardwoodKnocks on these, but I'm wearing a thermonuclear AF t-shirt for anyone who can't see, and anyone who can see, the mic's in the way, so I make no apologies. I would aggressively, if you're getting clothes, recommend upsizing. Yeah. Aggressively upsizing. Grant and I can confirm after having some test merch. So that's exciting. We've got stickers, the whole nine. Maybe we'll eventually run some giveaways depending on how popular these things become, but stickers, pins, mugs. Grant says they hold up in the dishwasher. So the reviews are in. Get yourself some HardwoodKnocks swag. And now we get to the actual thing that people care about. Grant, how are you doing?
I'm feeling good. I just want you to know, this is my favorite thing from the last few days from the NBA, that if you ever need to demote me from the starting lineup, unlike D'Angelo Russell, you will not quote unquote lose me. Did you see that? That's my favorite thing, because it just says everything you need to know about Russell, doesn't it? Like, wasn't that's the information you need if you're thinking about signing him this summer.
Well, and the other thing is, like, did you see that they actually did lose him? I don't know if did you see the picture of him when there was that skirmish between, I think it was Aaron Gordon and LeBron James in the first half?
It was and Jeff Van Gundy, because he is triggered by this every time, said something to the effect of, like, he wants no part of the skirmish or whatever it was, which he always means as like a knock. Oh, look at you. Let's go. Perfect timing.
He's like, fuck this.
He was shooting practice threes. That was great. Yeah. If there's a danger of losing someone based on their role in like a do or die playoff game, that guy's already lost. It's beyond saving at that point.
We're going to get to the Lakers, but I think we need to, I build this as the thumbnail. I don't know if you looked at the thumbnail. It's time. And this doesn't really feel like a spicy question for us, who both of us had Nikola Jokic as our MVP. And I think we would have had him as we don't go into rankings really on the show, but we would have had him as a top 5 player pretty easily. But there's always these conversations. We saw it with Giannis. We've seen it with Kawhi, Durant, LeBron, where they have these strong playoff campaigns, or their teams make the finals, or their team wins the championship. And so this can be with the caveat that the Nuggets need to win the title. It could be with what we've seen so far. Is Nikola Jokic the best player in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, when you texted, we were talking about this yesterday. You texted and said, should we have a discussion, or should we ask whether Jokic is the best player in the NBA? And my thought was going to be, this will be a short discussion, because, like, I guess maybe so. Yeah, I think so. Right. Because I guess maybe as much as anybody, you would say that he needed like playoff validation, right? Because those were sort of the only questions, his MVP detractors or people that just were not on board with trusting the catch-all metrics that very clearly have said for a long time he's the best player in the league. He needed to prove that defensively he could hold up, and honestly, like, had to prove that to me. I think I needed to see an extended playoff run where the Nuggets defended well enough with him on the floor to sort of validate all of the sort of indisputable regular season stuff. But yeah, I think so. I don't know even if the Nuggets need to win a title for me to feel comfortable saying that, just because, like, construct the argument against that supposition now. It's just like, what even is it? Because you can't really, he's been the best player in the postseason. They've now advanced to the finals convincingly. Kevin Durant gone, LeBron gone, Anthony Davis gone. It's not like, they've beaten great players. So it's kind of like, as Stefan Stojic says, Jokic was the best player for the past 4 years in the comments. Like, I think I talked about this last time. now we need to start like sort of recalibrating what we've thought over the last several years and just acknowledge that maybe he's not only the best right now, he's been the best for a while. Because I don't know about you, but I don't really have a good counter to that idea.
No, and you even mentioned that we even might be giving too much credence to he needed this playoff resume boost. I guess anecdotally to say, okay, he's going to the NBA Finals, but his playoff numbers were never bad. I mean, yeah, the plus minus was off, but look at what he was working with the past 2 years. And so now you put this incredibly talented supporting cast around him, and the Nuggets are headed to the finals. And there's just, I don't want to hear any of the caveats either. The margins were so thin for like that. You could say the league wasn't as talented at the top this year. Well, guess what? We were wrong about the Bucks. We said that they might have been I said they were the closest thing to a juggernaut the league had. I was wrong. Yeah. And then the Nuggets were right there. The Nuggets were the closest thing to just a formality we had all season, or an inevitability. And I guess I have to tip my cap to Nuggets fans here. They got mad during one of our, I think, broadcasts, actually, when I said, I'm actually concerned about how this last month of the season or so is going, because it just looked like something was off. And really, they were just, I don't want to say they were screwing around, but it was just the stakes weren't high enough for them because they are that good, or they were, whatever it was. Maybe it wasn't maybe it was inadvertent that it happened, but they were able to overcome it. And I think for Jokic specifically, I'm with you where it's time to relitigate how we viewed him all these past 3 years, because the biggest, and you touched upon this, but whether it was fair or not, and I think it's proving that it's unfair, the biggest knock against him was, and it was among smart people too. This isn't us talking against the wall where it's, hey, we're dunking on these clearly disingenuous takes. Yes, some of them, Drew Hanlon, Sixers propaganda, like some of them skewed towards disingenuous. There were very smart people I respect, that thought it was a fair question. You had questions about his defense in the playoffs. So did I. I thought that a lot of Nuggets fans tended to romanticize his defense, and that came to bear a lot this season. There were questions I'm not saying that I'm among the smart people, but I think people that wanted to have had a legitimate conversation about this. And it's just, he's in the finals now. And it was like, that was the biggest question. And maybe it was probably a fair question for the most part, but like, it was being asked for years. This question has been being asked. And I would say, I think the issue with the question was a lot of people were answering it in the disaffirmative, where it was, no, you can't win a title. It wasn't a curiosity. It was just this foregone conclusion that you can't win a title with him as your best player. And we have this in the chat from Ryan Eggers, which dovetails with it. If Jokic wins the title, is this the quickest MVP voters ever regret their decision? And I will say, I don't think it is, because I think it would dilute Jokic's own MVPs if we say, well, look at how far Jokic made it relative to Embiid, when the knock was, Jokic got bounced and he shouldn't have won MVP. But like, that was also part of the Jokic discourse too, where it was, he can't go far in the playoffs. And it's just funny in the year that he doesn't win MVP. And it's funny that it was after, I think it was after game 4, he says the conference finals MVP means absolutely nothing to him, which is iconic answer. It's, you said it right. I'm basically just stepping on toes of everything you said. It's not just about, is he the best player in the NBA? If you want to have a discussion, and I want to get into certain players that I'm going to not take over him anymore or consider, but the discussion is fine. But like, this is almost about actually being revisionist or going back in hindsight and saying, you know what, like, the discussion really missed on him, because this isn't a conversation that gained validity now, but it never necessarily should have needed to. Like, he's always been, even if you would take other players, like, this has just been a consensus top 5, top 3 player for how long now?
Yeah, I think you do have to acknowledge that he has gotten better. He has improved in several ways, not the least of which is defensively, but like, he's just gotten all around better as a scorer, as a 2-point, field goal percentage guy. As the 3 has kind of come and gone, as has the volume, but he has just improved. So I guess, like, if I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit, because I do think we need to look at the last several years and just kind of maybe revise what we thought. But I also think you have to hold in your mind the idea that he has improved. So it's not like, well, 3 years ago, he was clearly the best player in the world. Like, there's an argument, but he's a better version of himself now. So it's easier to say he's the best now. But I think the sort of kind of related idea we have to start thinking about is almost everything we said about Jokic, or not we necessarily, but that has been said about Jokic to devalue him or kind of keep him from this top spot, probably does need to apply to Joel Embiid now, right? Because he's got the MVP. Not to say he didn't deserve it. I'm fine with him winning MVP this year. I think, I thought it was Jokic. It's close enough that I can't really complain. But now he's the one that hasn't even made a conference finals and has had like significant playoff drop off relative to regular season production. Some of that's injury, but at this point, if it happens every year, it's just part of it. And Jokic, I think in contrast, does not see statistical drop off in the postseason, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So I think if you had those opinions about Jokic, you really do need to transfer those to Embiid now. Fair or not, but just for consistency's sake, I think we need to just kind of basically, keep, as the kids would say, keep the same energy. Like that's what needs to happen now, right? Because you can't say any of the stuff that used to be said about Jokic. So he's just, if he's not the best player in the world, he's at least put to bed most of the knocks against him, if not all of them so far.
Do you think he needs, I think the discourse, and again, I really do feel like for the most part, the basketball intelligentsia has warmed up to Jokic long before now, but there's still that just like undercurrent of skepticism or attempts to invalidate what he's done or downplay it. Do you think I feel like we're already due for just like a generational 180 on the discourse. And like entering the NBA finals, I think we're going to see like a generational 180 on a lot of stances. Do you think he actually needs to even win the title for that to happen? And like, are we going to say if the Nuggets lost to the Celtics or Heat in 6-7 games, whatever, do you think that I think we both agree he has, but do you think there would still be those questions? Like they would just, well, look, he couldn't win in the finals. Like he got there and he couldn't win.
I think probably not for me personally, but I think if you're asking like, will that be part of the discussion? Like, will a talking head bring that up? 100% yes, because that's like it's a controversial take and it's believable enough for a certain segment of NBA fans. But like, if he does win it, I think then there's no rational way to think about him other than as probably right there with Giannis as like the best player of the 2015 and on, or something like that, right? Maybe a little bit later than that, or certainly like the best player of this decade so far. And I don't know who even really else would be in that conversation. Like the Curry prime starts quite a lot earlier and is, tailing off a little bit maybe. But yeah, it's him and Giannis, right? Like those are the two guys you would bring up as say the last 5 years, maybe a little bit less than that. But if he gets this one, you'll be able to say he's got the 2 MVPs. The only reason he didn't make a deep playoff run before was because like his second and third best teammates were hurt last year and not ready prior to that. So you run out of stuff to say or other guys to nominate other than Giannis as, even being in the same conversation, I think.
And that's, I think, what's interesting now to me. And I don't know if we gave it enough consideration, or maybe it was still clinging to the idea of, well, Kawhi and Kevin Durant, like, look at what they would be able to do in the playoffs. It really is, I guess, Luka. It really just is Giannis or Jokic at this point, right? If you're talking about who's the best player in the world. And I know that Giannis has been consensus for a while. And if you default to him, I think that's fine too. But when you're talking about people who are realistically challenging for that spot, is like what name do you come up with aside from Giannis and Jokic at this point?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned some of the skepticism around Jokic, which really like feels irrational just because if you're a numbers person, the numbers are just like, there's no argument. And now if you're, was he the best player on the best team? I mean, so far, pretty much, yeah, this year, certainly in the postseason. And I think a lot of it stems from sometimes the best things he does look a little like bullshit. And there was a perfect example in game 4 last night, as we're recording this on Tuesday. He hit another just absurd, maybe there were 2 ridiculous shot clock winding down, Sombor shuffle, like wrong-footed step back 3 over Anthony Davis. That seems like, well, that was lucky, right? Like that's a garbage shot. Like that's just a prayer, except like he's made several of those in the playoffs. And it's just the things that he does look awkward and difficult. And it's just he does them successfully often enough to now where you say, no, that's just extreme skill. It just doesn't look the same as Giannis taking 3 steps from half court and dunking over 4 guys. Like we understand that. Like that's something that if you're an NBA fan for a long time, you recognize as dominance or like overwhelming skill. Jokic is just different, and it bumps you a little bit because it looks unorthodox or weird or unathletic even sometimes. And I think a lot of the skepticism is just the aesthetics are weird. Like they don't look the same as what dominance is in our, in our minds.
Which is, I guess that I get it, but it's also weird because when you're watching it happen, it is so dominant.
Right.
Versus like it happens so often, or just even something simple where it's like he's the ultimate just putting you in this dilemma if you decide to actually double him. Right. Because of what he does as a passer and uses those angles and how like the reads he's making and the fakes he's making, the angles he's working. And you watch this, and I agree that it's, eccentric or a different, abnormal relative to conventional forms of dominance, but it's still dominant when you're watching it. It was never just a numbers, like it was never just like if you were watching Nikola Jokic, I don't know how you would come away with anything other than this is one of the 2 or 3 most dominant offensive players in the league, but for the past like 3-4 years or whatever. And I guess that's what's always kind of, I thought that there've been really intelligent, thorough discussions on the defense and like the discrepancy between the metrics and what you're actually watching. But it just, the way that people were just so quick to write off stuff that and again, I'm not painting with a broad brush and saying everyone did this. There were plenty of people that voted. He won 2 MVPs. So I don't think this is some underdog story I mean, he's an underdog in the sense like, look where he was drafted, but this isn't like Nikola Jokic came out of nowhere, even though I do think it kind of feels like some people, or I don't know if they're more casual fans or if it's like super national media, are like shell shocked by what he's done during these playoffs a little bit still. And that is surprising I'm surprised by their surprise. Is by anyone's surprise at this point is basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't have a lot else to say on him. I do think I think so. Just to kind of broaden this a little bit, we've been quick to, and the playoffs do this because we all agree that, well, the playoffs are where you really learn about players and stuff. Like we crowned Devin Booker, we've crowned Jason Tatum and seen them both fail in different ways, like some very conspicuously in Tatum's case. And like, Butler, I think probably has been properly crowned as just way better than people give him credit for. I don't feel like there's a danger of, prisoner of the moment thinking or jumping to a conclusion based on one playoff series or anything with Jokic, just because of the longer track record. Like it's all I would think of it this way. He's just confirming what we kind of suspected, as opposed to, oh, this is some leap and it's, I think it's sustainable. It's not that. It's just, oh no, he is this good. And it's like a much more sort of reserved, settled kind of feeling, as opposed to when, just name the young player du jour that we think has finally leveled up. It's not the same thing. It's a different feeling for him.
And look, his conference finals numbers were even, and I know Murray was on one as a scorer, which is, and look, we'll eventually talk about the finals and the Nuggets when they actually have an opponent, which could happen after tonight. But Jokic, 27.8 points, 11.8 assists, 14.5 rebounds, 1.3 steals, 1.3 blocks, 47.1% on threes, just monster series. And Jamal Murray, some people thought he should have gotten the Western Conference Finals MVP. I disagree, just because there was still we felt it even in kind of game 4. His peaks and valleys require Dramamine sometimes. I know he's battling an ear infection for part of the series, but there are just such highs and lows within some of his best games. And Jokic the dominance is more steadying, even when he might not be having his, most efficient performances, which are still by most measures hyper efficient. And I'm excited for this team, in large part because I picked them to win the title, and I really would love to do one of those victory laps. Oh, yeah. Think about how close, because I picked the Suns during their first year together with CP3, and they made it to the finals. If I went on a run where I had the Suns winning and the Nuggets winning, I would be already barely borderline unlistenable when I'm on the podcast. So imagine how insufferable we'd be.
Couldn't have done anything with you.
I'm with you, though. I think we're all in agreement that if you don't think Nikola Jokic is the best player in the league, I might be there. I've been a Giannis guy. I think I'm there because I do believe there's more limitations that Giannis poses when you're building out a team. And we were always able to say that about Jokic, but because Giannis had won at higher levels and because he had that defensive edge, and now I'm just like, you put the right personnel around Jokic, and I know it's taken a very specific set of personnel to get here. Guess what? Like the Nuggets, I know that they can play like 7 or 8 guys. Like you have your 6 trustworthy guys. Like, and then you get into the Jeff Greens and the Christian Browns.
Yeah.
Like it's
the maybe not tonight, guys. You know,
right. And so I wouldn't say it was easy, but like look at the blends of skill sets that they've been just thrown in there. And a lot of it's okay. Well, Aaron Gordon give you the necessary 3-point volume, or like we're going to have to use Bruce Brown differently than the Brooklyn Nets were able to use Bruce Brown. And we're going to have to navigate a night where Michael Porter Jr. is not shooting as well, which holy crap, Michael Porter Jr., the rebounding and defense, just like making it. I mean, I don't even know if this is like his 90th percentile outcome either. And so like, there's a chance that he still gets better. This team, we're going to have a lot more to say about them. I'm very interested to see who they face in the finals. And let's get to that very quickly, since a lot of this could be outdated. I'll put it up immediately in audio form. We have Celtics Heat game 4. I just want to know your overarching thoughts on this series so far. We got accused of being way too high on the Celtics in our primer. The haters were right. Apparently.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to say. Like they're on the verge of a sweep.
I think, first of all, the Heat just kind of complicate everything because they're so difficult to judge and evaluate without falling into cliches. I think for the Celtics, like, I guess the thought that I've been having is more forward looking because we're recording this. It's 3-0. It's done. You know, if it doesn't happen tonight, it'll happen soon. The Heat are going to advance. And I just have been thinking in terms of like, well, what do you do now? Because I don't think the right answer is you break up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, unless it's the financial stuff. You don't want to pay Jaylen Brown what he's going to cost on his next deal. Because Tatum, I think that's not a player you let go. I don't care that he's had bad fourth quarters and bad games. He's had great games and he's still really young. And just, that's a guy I am fine with as my cornerstone. But I also think about like, they're one of the last 4 teams standing. Mm-hmm. They've been to the finals. They've had a ton of playoff runs. You'd be really hard pressed to find the moves that would certainly get you back to this level. You know, if you're going to make a bunch of changes, you know, certainly significant ones to their main players, like good luck getting a team that has this ceiling, right? So like that makes it naturally, well, what about the coach? And there's a lot of noise around Joe Mazzulla, and I think some of it's probably warranted. Just
signed into a 4-year deal, right? An extension. Yeah. So even if 3 of those are guaranteed, are they really going to get? Maybe he's not making as much as Udoka was, but like a coach with 3 guaranteed years left on his deal, you're really getting rid of him.
Yeah, but I mean, if the alternative is whatever other the alternatives are, they're all more drastic than just getting rid of the coach that you never intended to be the head coach this year anyway. You know, right. You could the 4-year deal was kind of wild, but I think whatever else you do will be more questionable than moving on from the coach that, you know, everybody's complained all year about. He doesn't call timeouts, and I don't really care about that, but some of the tactical stuff, some of just we have to go here. I hate this. We have to go here. Everybody I think was correct that said the Celtics, you know, quit and that they've lacked fight, and, you know, just something feels wrong. And it's just, it feels like maybe we can't go any farther without just completely speculating, but it seems like it's motivational. It seems like maybe they don't trust what they're doing. It seems like maybe they're frustrated or just don't buy in, you know? And so like, I think probably that's got to go on Mazzulla, because unless stuff comes out about, you know, player relationships and things just aren't working well. But again, like I just, it's a tough spot to be in, because I think the knee jerk reaction, like the way that this series has gone, just is the type of thing that spurs teams to do drastic stuff. And I just don't know if that's like, if you're just talking about maximizing or trying to make like the right, almost like statistical decision, or like, you can't think of the right way to phrase it, but the odds of you improving on what the Celtics are right now by making a lot of personnel changes are pretty low. So I just don't know. I don't know how how in I am on the idea of let's really tear this thing apart.
And I think, look, and when you're looking at this series specifically, the opponent's points off turnovers, virtually the same. The Celtics have won the points in the paint battle. They've won the second chance points battle. And they've won the transition points battle. They're plus 14 in transition for the series. And second chance points, which means that they have missed more shots, but like they're plus 17. Like a lot of where they've lost this game, this series. Look, the Heat, they're shooting like 60% on wide open threes. Like their shooters have gotten really hot. But while there were questions about those shooters in the regular season, it was all like, oh, well, Kyle Lowry isn't performing up to snuff and Strus is having a down year. Mm-hmm. The fact that those guys are now hitting shots, and I still will argue that Duncan Robinson putting the ball on the floor came out of nowhere for me. I must not have watched the Heat closely enough. But they've lost it from three because they're shooting 32.6% on wide open threes. And I think for the series, I should have had this queued up to see how many more threes. Like Miami is making like more than 4 threes a game on average than the Celtics. And they've made 13 more threes. So a plus 39 from beyond the arc for the series. That's a big difference when you're looking at, especially how close those first 2 games were. Right. And I will say what I think has been the 2 things that have stood out is Boston. And this has always been the case with them. If they can't get into their early offense, it does feel like it's a mess. And a lot of them getting into their early offense is, hey, we need to get stops. And they have not been able to it feels like they haven't even been able to get stops adequately enough against Miami in the half court. Miami has a 106.3 offensive rating in the half court, which is monstrous for a half court offensive rating in this series. So, and that's monstrous overall. It would have ranked first in the regular season by like light years.
Yeah.
And when you look at what's happening where they're letting Duncan Robinson get by them off the dribble, it just doesn't make any sense. And it speaks to, I know, and Joe Mazzulla has been hard on himself by attributing this to a lack of preparedness on his part. And part of me does appreciate whenever, people are going to troll him. And I've seen a lot of jokes about how he uses timeouts, and I laugh at them because jokes are funny. But at some point, it's like, I'm not going to criticize him. They're saying, well, Udoka held these guys accountable in the media, and that was the better way to go. I mean, you want to quibble over that. At some point, though, like, you need to hold the players responsible. And I think it was Jaylen Brown or Tatum said this after game 3. Like, they said he's not out there bricking shots. And so, like, I just can't, I don't know how much blame to ascribe to Mazzulla here. This team just, like, is hitting its nadir at the worst possible time. I will, to actually respond to your point, that's the dilemma they face. And I think people have tried to oversimplify this, where I saw a lot of people think the Celtics should break up or make a drastic change because they've been together for so long. Whereas other people are like, okay, well, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are still so young. Why would you do that? And I see both sides of the argument. Jason Tatum next summer is going to be eligible, not this summer. Next summer is going to be eligible to sign a $300+ million extension. Jaylen Brown's eligible to sign a $295 million extension this summer. That's a big financial commitment to make to this core, so you need to be sure. But I think you could also argue those guys are more valuable if you need to trade them on those deals. And I skew towards you is I don't know how you get substantially better on one end of the floor. And it would have to be, I think it would probably be, if you're looking at this team, unless you're that concerned about the aging curve of Al Horford and the health of Robert Williams III, you probably want an upgrade at the point guard spot, where it's like it's fine that you have Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White. But a lot of those guys are either secondary playmakers, connective passers, where you need if Trae Young or Damian Lillard were to become available, if you wanted to go nuclear, should the Celtics be involved in those discussions? And I get the impetus to say yes. But I'm also just like, I do understand what you just said and how other people lean when they're saying, okay, well, like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are still so young and this team is still so talented. Wouldn't it make more sense to try and futz and fiddle on the margins than it would to go that seismic route? And the final thing I'll say is this becomes less of an issue if Jaylen Brown makes the decision for them. If he decides, I'm not going to sign my Supermax this year, you have to trade him. You can't let him go into unrestricted free agency if he turns down the Supermax.
No, I don't think so. The point guard point is well taken. I think so if the criticism of the Celtics is that, and I guess we have to start on offense, but we probably shouldn't overlook the fact that this is primarily a defensive team that is not guarding, and that's an issue. the worst version of the Celtics, the ball stops. Or like I feel like I at least have mentioned this every time we talk about them. Like when it goes bad for Boston, the ball stops, the turnovers start, the ball maybe swings around the perimeter, but it doesn't touch the paint first. And the Heat have been like, did you see that thing about somebody screen capped an Eric Spoelstra locker room moment where they had on the screen behind him their points per play on paint touches versus non-paint touches? And it's like 1.68 to 1.0 something. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's why the Heat have played better offenses. They're just getting into the paint before they start the churn, basically. And the Celtics don't do that as effectively, especially in those really ugly stretches where they just look like they can't figure out how to play offense. So I think you probably want somebody that can just get into the paint and start the machine moving. Like the Heat seem to have, everyone on their roster seems to be able to get by their guy and get into the lane and, at least draw help or put the defense in rotation. It's a really terrible free agent market for point guards. Boston doesn't have the money to sign one. You're talking about trades. So yeah, but that's where it starts. And then after that, I don't really know what you do. This is the kind of series that makes you reevaluate everything. And like, frankly, like one positionals, they made the finals last year. Like they like one position with the same team minus Malcolm Brogdon. Like there's just like the positional switch or, upgrading a little bit. I don't know how much it matters. The more I think about it and talk about it, the more it seems like a coaching thing, whether it's motivational or tactical. Like there's enough talent on this roster, like 1 through 8, probably 7, maybe to not be facing the possibility of a sweep. That like, there might be minor injuries, but it's not like they're missing Jaylen Brown it's not like some might argue the Celtics in this series would be doing better if Jaylen Brown weren't playing because he's been so bad. But like, there's not the Heat don't have Tyler Hero. Like,
right.
Like for a team that our biggest questions about them were offensively, they lose probably their second best shot creator after Jimmy Butler, and it just doesn't matter. So the Celtics aren't in that position. So I don't have a lot to add other than I just don't think it's personnel. I don't think it is.
I guess my final question on the Celtics, because we need to talk about the Heat, but
yeah.
Do you think that the coaching market as it stands right now, as we're recording this, makes it more appealing to say, or easier to make the decision of like, yeah, we shouldn't have given Mazzulla this extension, or we don't think he's the right fit. We think he's going to be a talented up and coming coach, but it's just not what we need right now. Is it easier to make that call knowing that you could just bring back Doc Rivers? I'm just
that makes it
easier, Dan. At least I know you're listening to me. I wanted to.
Well, I was like, wait, did he say Docker? Because I was thinking, well, yeah, like Nurse or even Budenholzer or like Frank Vogel could probably.
But so do you think it makes it easy? Though no, you mentioned the guys that are out there. Do you think it like even Ty Lue could maybe become available? Yeah. There's all those rumblings in LA right now.
It has to. There's like a kind of an embarrassment of like coaches that not only that seem like they'd be upgrades from an experience standpoint, but guys that have like won titles and been to finals and it, I just, if you want to knock, but we know the knocks on all these guys. So they got fired for reasons, I guess. But like, I find it hard to believe that Budenholzer, for example, like would at least like have more of an offensive system that wouldn't just fall apart. Like that's, they're probably Milwaukee fans that are like saying, oh, actually, that's not so much true, but, or Nurse would at least try some weird different stuff. I just, coaching is the easiest thing to change and there's no guarantee it'll be better, but I just have a hard time imagining it would be any worse if they've made a change. And there are good options out there for sure. Kenny Atkinson, even he's probably going to get hired before the Celtics are, really starting their search, but there's tons of options.
I find it interesting that people don't think he can coach a good team, by the way, when it comes to Kenny Atkinson. I think Brooklyn he's known as a developmental coach because of what he did in Atlanta and also Brooklyn, but he wasn't given a chance. And right. That was the disaster. The Heat, though, I don't really know. They're just, I want to make this clear. We were wrong about the Heat. I think the Heat were wrong about the Heat. If you pulled them internally, everyone aside, I think from Jimmy Butler would not have expected. I don't even know if Jimmy Butler expected this. There were reports coming out that they were disenchanted by Kyle Lowry entering the playoffs. And now he just comes in and he's just super important to what they're doing. Defensively, connector on offense. They're getting their supporting cast to hit their looks. And I mean, I can't, like, Caleb Martin has been fantastic for much of the postseason. The Duncan Robinson renaissance we already mentioned, been incredible. Max Strus, he's had some peaks and valleys here, but he's been huge for them. Gabe Vincent will go through these streaks where just like the shot selection feels putrid, but they almost need him to take those shots because one, sometimes they go in, and two, they put like a different sort of pressure on the defense. Bam has been, I feel like that's kind of flown under the radars. Yeah, he's not having like 80 field goal attempts every single game, but he's been super aggressive for like long pockets of time offensively. And he's just like this defensive, like, I don't even know what the word is, just absolute monster. They are, I mean, like even having Kevin Love and like being able to push that button, I don't know that I can wrap my head around the Heat. And I wanted to know if you have any overarching thoughts on them, but I also wanted to, someone asked me this when I went on a podcast the other day, do you see teams trying to replicate what the Heat have done? And my answer was just like, I don't think any team can count on unearthing as many hidden gems, that this is not a replicable model because it's so unique. And I would argue so fragile that I don't even think the Heat, if we go into the offseason, I think they win the title. They're still going to be opportunistic when it comes to making, like, I don't want to get into the roster changes, but not that I don't view, I guess I'm saying I don't view this as sustainable, but this is it's such a shock. And there's definitely an element of sustainability to it because like we've seen the Heat do this before with this. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, largely with this same group. But I will say outside of Miami, this is not something, whenever we talk about champions or finals, like finals participants, it's, yeah, teams are going to be on the lookout to do what that, like, you can't do what the Heat are doing. You can't.
No, I mean, and you don't even need to like dig that deeply into that statement to validate it because they're an eighth seed. Like they lost the first play-in game. It's just like the improbability of where they are is so great that like trying to do whatever it is that they've done is like, that's stupid because that's going to get you the eighth seed if you're lucky and you might squeak into the playoffs. And then basically, if you're saying let's replicate what the Heat are doing, you're saying let's have every single relevant player who has contributed just play better than they did at any point during the year. Like everyone.
What a novel concept.
Yeah, it's like, oh, let's just, it's like the joke on Twitter is always like, okay, well, let's talk adjustments after this playoff loss. And it's like, well, there's always the play better adjustment, right? Or like shoot better adjustment. The Heat that's what this is. They've all just played better. Now that detracts from certainly Eric Spoelstra. I think one thing we'll take away from these playoffs, one is that we can't make jokes about like, you can't make side eyes at Heat culture anymore as like a thing because it's clearly a thing. And it's like, that's a real thing. It's not like, oh, you can't roll your eyes. And the other thing will be that Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the league, right? Like you can't take an eighth seed this deep and have the previous track record that he does and then just like discuss anyone else in that position. And I think, so yeah, everyone play better. Can't replicate that. And then have probably the best coach in the league. Hard to replicate that. I think like the thing that struck me in every series so far, and the Heat haven't been perfect, but like it always seems like their adjustments are proactive and the things that they change cause trouble for the other team, as opposed to being in the position where you're thinking, well, how are the Heat going to deal with this? It's always like, well, they're fine. And then now the other team has to figure out what to do when the offense has stalled, but now Bam Adebayo is bringing the ball up and initiating the offense. What do we do with that? And like, yeah, all of that looks better when Caleb Martin can't miss and Gabe Vincent is playing with the confidence of like an all NBA player. And same with Strus, Duncan Robinson, like, the fact that he was out of the rotation and basically a pariah because he signed that big contract after a great year and maybe more than one great year, but then was just like not playing. And now he's in like integral part of how they're succeeding offensively against theoretically a really good defense. They played multiple good defenses. That's like, talk about not replicable. Having a guy, basically usually you lose that guy. We joked about D'Angelo Russell, but like usually you don't see the guy relegated to like, you don't play anymore. and then he's called on in the playoffs and is like somehow a better version of the best version of himself. He's not just a spot shooter or a movement shooter.
Right.
Like I
I've
just
never seen him put the ball on the floor so often as I have. And it's not just this series, by the way.
no, been the whole, it's when he's played, he's been better than the best version of himself. So yeah, you can't replicate this other than to say like, maybe we should emphasize continuity. Maybe we should emphasize like really demanding conditioning standards, which the Heat have. Maybe we should emphasize whatever it is Miami's got going, where nobody seems to care like who gets the credit or who. It's just like we're like shoveling cliches on, because like statistically all we can point to is like, yeah, they're making all their shots and they're playing great defense on a per possession basis, and like, yeah, okay, cool. Like if you're going to replicate stuff, I guess it's got to be the hashtag Heat culture stuff, which like doesn't appeal to every type of player, by the way. Like there are a lot of guys that I think probably don't want to play in Miami because it's hard, or it's demanding. You've got to pass all these conditioning tests and all, you hear all the stories about their off-season stuff and how just it's harder. Maybe harder is better. I don't know. Is that the takeaway? We've gone soft as a society. We should all aspire to kill ourselves in practice and workouts like the Heat do. I don't know. Nobody has an answer, Dan. Like nobody has an answer.
It could just be Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra exist.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just like two of a kind, and that's all it is. You can't have them. And if you don't have them, this can't happen for your team. I don't know.
That's the other thing they've done is just like the adjustments they're able to make on the fly. And you've kind of pointed to that. And Jared Weiss of The Athletic had pointed this out too. Like they're willing to even just, they will put defenses where they want them by butchering their own spacing, like to just make sure just the defenders they want are at certain spots on the floor. It's wild. The question that I do think has cropped up as a result of this, and I was curious what your thought on it was, do you think that what the Heat are doing, or maybe even what we've seen by and large during these playoffs, because we did just see the Lakers as a 7 seed make the conference finals, and the second round was 6 versus 7. Has it diminished the meaning of the regular season even further, these playoff results, in your opinion?
I mean, maybe a little bit, because now you've got, well, the play-in. First of all, it's like the play-in is never going away now. Not right. That it was, but I think it does make it, a little more appealing. So maybe this leads to more load management, which would be not great. Because if you just believe that you have the team that's good enough at full strength to make a deep run, you don't really care where you get into the playoffs. I think you have to view it in conjunction with like, well, Denver's a number 1 seed. And I think we both agree that they're going to be favored in the finals. And so like, yeah, the seeding stuff still matters. But certainly if you have a certain kind of team, maybe you care even less about, oh, let's really push for the 5th seed or just what, like, the playoffs are, you just never know what version of a top seed you're going to see. You might as well just focus on getting in, I guess. So I think probably it does devalue the regular season a little bit more, which is like, that's a big problem as it is. I don't know. I think maybe that's not great if that has that effect. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think it kind of has to, doesn't it?
I kind of skew no, because I think you look at it, the Heat specifically, like were all these, or even look at the Lakers, like they were a completely different team by the end of the regular season because of, there were some injuries, but also just like they overhauled their team at the deadline. And in the case of the Heat, like they had a bunch of guys miss time again this year, or they had guys going through slumps. It's not like, hey, they decided we're going to shelve Duncan Robinson until the playoffs, and that's when we'll dust him off, and we're going to save him until then. And even just, you look at sort of the landscape where it does feel like injuries factor into it as well like the Sixers, like they had missed time. James Harden had missed time this year. Mm-hmm. So like, even, I don't know, like, I guess in the West, it's more wild because we saw the 6 and the 7 seeded Lakers and Warriors get to the semifinals. But like even the Warriors, okay, their personnel was by and large the same, but they dealt with the punch at the beginning of the season and they never really got any traction, and they have this championship pedigree. So it's not shocking that they would beat the Kings when it took 7 games to get there. And I guess if you want to say the regular season means less in the sense that it feels like we're going to see the best product for each team on a lower frequency rate, I would probably agree. I don't know if that makes the regular season less meaningful, because can the Heat just simply choose to enter as the 7, have the 7th best record, and then just make the finals. That's not a position that you actively want to put yourself in.
Yeah, it's not like the Heat weren't trying to win during the year. It's just that whatever they were trying didn't work as well. Like that goes back to the like replicability of what they're doing. There's just like, this is not a model that you want to follow probably. I don't know. Like, we probably don't need to jump all the way ahead to the Denver Miami matchup, partly because I'm just like not ready to think about that yet. But
get ready, we're gonna be recording that sometime this week, I think.
I know. I think so. I think it's likely. I don't know. I do think, well, the other Miami thing that's going to be interesting is like how expensive or how much are they willing to pay to keep this team together? And do they view Gabe Vincent and Max Strus as like fungible, because they've got bird rights on both, but they could just say like, yeah, we'll just find the next, versions of these guys and we can let them go get paid 10x what they're making now someplace else. I don't know. Maybe that's like, do we?
They just won't go out and find another Gabe Vincent or Max Strus in the G League. They just like
well, maybe. I mean, is that the takeaway? Is clearly the Heat have like they've scout better than everybody, and they see stuff in players that nobody else does, and they develop it. Like maybe that's where the real replicability of this thing is you just spend more money or get better people at those types of things. Because like you can't just. The Strus and Vincent in particular are just like, I can't, like, anyone could have had both of those guys for, years. Just didn't happen. I don't know if I think they just got better. The Heat made them better. That's what happened.
The two other things I want to ask you about: the Bucks coaching search really quickly. It seems like they've narrowed it down to Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson, or Adrian Griffin. Any thoughts on that?
Nurse is kind of interesting, the most interesting, because the other guys are mainly career assistants with, I guess, Atkinson we've already mentioned as the Nets coach, but I would be curious to see what Nurse would do with Giannis and with like kind of a, if it's an unusual setup where they've been defined by a very specific style, both on offense and defense under Budenholzer. So like, I think if you're of the opinion that Milwaukee has the talent to win a title, it just needs to be kind of tweaked a little bit. I think Nurse is the guy. I'd be just most curious to see what a Bucks team would look like under him, because I don't feel like the other guys would be as likely to make significant changes. But maybe it's hard to say because they're a little bit lesser known commodities. But Nurse is the most interesting, right? Just because. I mean, he might also just not be a good coach. We don't know. Like, he got fired. So who can say? I
kind of find Kenny Atkinson to be the most interesting one. Actually, Adrian Griffin is the most interesting one because with making a hiring of like this first time guy,
nothing, no idea about him.
And so, he's been part of these like head coaching searches in the past. Like, he's been prominently linked to a bunch of different jobs, I think, over the past like 3 or 4 years or so. And I think he was even linked to didn't he get an interview for the Raptors one right now too? So and he's been an assistant with them since 2018, I think. So he was does it make the risk inherently less because he has such an extensive track record as an assistant, and he was an assistant on the championship team in Toronto? That's objectively the most interesting, because I do think there's people know way more about what coaching than I'm ever going to learn. But there is a level of, it's easier to justify hiring the more established, flashier name when you're at the level that the Bucks are, which is, despite what Giannis might say at the end of each season, like it's pretty much championship or bust for them. It's more than, part of the journey. Like, you want to make it out of the first round if you're Milwaukee. Like, they're at that point.
The hiring an assistant to replace the departed head coach, kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like, it could go either way, because in theory, this is the person that's in position to know exactly what did not work. But it's also someone that probably ideologically is somewhat aligned with the guy that just got fired. So
right.
It's hard to know like which way that's going to cut. And players always like, the assistants more, just because they're generally the good cops. So like, you always hear that players like support the hiring of an in-house assistant. It's just because like they're familiar, and probably that's not been the guy that said you're getting benched or is killing you in film sessions or whatever. Like it's tricky. I don't know which way that cuts.
I would be interested, I guess, to see any of them there. Kenny Atkinson's the one that I feel like might be the most inventive for them on offense, or maybe not inventive because Nick Nurse is known as this tactician, but like the Raptors had talent and like they weren't able to win a whole bunch of games this year. And so and also I know a lot of people, one of the complaints was that Bud wouldn't play some of the most prominent players enough. And then Nick Nurse might skew all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where if the Bucks don't materially change their depth, or we talking about Giannis averaging like 39 minutes a game next year or something, which probably skews too far towards that extreme end of the spectrum. I would be most fascinated by the Kenny Atkinson hire, though, because I think that would bring, just knowing his offensive tenets, like from Brooklyn and then spending so much time with the Warriors now, I think he could have, and maybe I'm just undervaluing Nurse here and don't know enough about Griffin. It's all very possible. I think he might have the most visible influence on how the Bucks play and operate.
Wasn't he under Budenholzer in Atlanta? Did I imagine that? I can't remember.
In Atlanta, was that during the Budenholzer era? I don't know.
I don't know.
Check when he was there.
Because like Quinn Snyder was there too, right? Wasn't he? So I think it was. So maybe you run into like he's just going to come in and have a little bit too much Coach Bud in him. I think Atkinson though probably feels the safest.
You were right, by the way. He was there. He crossed over with the Budenholzer.
Thank you. I was trying to vamp while you looked that up. I guess I could have done that. I don't know. He feels the safest now, but although now I'm concerned. I've talked myself into being concerned about Atkinson just basically doing Budenholzer.
Well, think about how long ago that was. That was like 2015.
That's true. But no. Guess what, Bucks? There's no good coach. Just bring Budenholzer back. That's probably what the takeaway should be.
Are you surprised that Monty Williams hasn't been heavy, like that he's not one of the finalists for this gig?
Actually, I don't know what to think about him. Because I think we both agree that he was maybe one of the more surprising firings. So you would think that he would be pretty close to the top of the list for almost everybody. I wonder if maybe he's not looking to get back into coaching right away, just because his name, like you put his name next to some of the assistants that are getting considered, and it's kind of like, I mean, Monty Williams has been coach of the year twice, right? And like has been to a finals recently, has won a bunch of games. Like it seems to be very highly respected. Although again, like we said, when he got fired, if Kevin Durant and Devin Booker had absolutely wanted him back, he would probably still be there. So who knows, right?
And I'm sure that he wouldn't use DeAndre Ayton as a reference for
no. Yeah, do not call. He's on the do not call list.
The Lakers, who we talk about shockingly little on this podcast. You ever realize that we talk about it? Should that be like our brand? Like we're the national podcast that doesn't ever talk about the Lakers.
Very little Lakers.
A lot to unpack. I do want to start with, and I did text you about this just now while we were recording. It might be germane to our time crunch here, but LeBron sort of mentioning that he has a lot to figure out, hinting at the idea that, he could retire. I likened it to, I want to get your thoughts, but this is my analogy. You've run 20 marathons, trained and run 20 marathons, one per year. Immediately after crossing the finish line of number 20, immediately you're asked whether you are going to run next year's and when you're going to start training for it. Now, you're exhausted. Depending on how you finished, you're blinded by euphoria or disappointment.
Yeah.
Or something in between, maybe indifference. I would say that your answer could stand to be a little cryptic or be dripping with an unintended sense of finality. And that's what I sort of chalk this up to. Or it could just be a scare tactic. I'm just curious as to where you land on the LeBron saying, and look, it was the report from Bleacher Report's Chris Haynes that LeBron is going to consider retirement.
Yeah.
So this is not like LeBron misspoke. This is sourced reporting that LeBron is apparently going to consider retirement this offseason. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to your analogy that you're also way past the age that anyone else has voluntarily continued to run marathons. Like you shouldn't even have run this one probably just based on, what normal people do. So yeah, no, that is a great way to frame it. That was my very first, because I'm a relentless cynic. My very first thought was like, well, he's found a way to dominate the news cycle for a few days again. Like this is, being in the spotlight is a good thing for financially and just for attention purposes and whatever. I've backed off that a little bit, but I do think it's like the worst time to ask. To your point, it's the worst time to ask somebody like what their intentions are. I think you get some version of this. Sometimes you get the guy that says not specific to are you going to play next year, but to like what's the plan? How do you feel? It's like get right back to it. Just work hard in the off season, start tomorrow. You get that sometimes, but most of the time everybody's just like, I need a break. I'm going to take some time off. And then, I'll get back to basketball when I get back to it. This is just an extreme version of that, I think. Like wouldn't it be more surprising if he had said like, I feel great. This was not difficult. I didn't play hurt for like 3 months. My body, everything hurts. I'm 38. Like I have more mileage than anyone. This year I finished scoring more points than anyone's ever scored. Like, but I just want, I want more. Like, of course he's just at the end of his rope. He's tired. Like if he had unequivocally said, ready to get back at it, like that would be way weirder. Like that, I couldn't imagine someone saying that in his position.
He would have gotten drug tested on the spot if he said that. After playing basically all 48 minutes, I know he had that like 5-second rest at the end of the first half in game 4, and he dropped 40 points, 15 and 25 shooting, 9 assists, and it still wasn't enough. You have to like be sitting there like, what the fuck? Like,
what do I got to do? I mean, like, I think there was another quote either yesterday or today about, I think maybe it was in the Haynes piece about something to the effect of like, because I'm still better than 90 to 95% of players in the league, which is basically true. So like, he'll be back, right? I mean, like
he's signed to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Not that it matters to him. You're probably going to say the same thing, but he's like got 46.7 million coming next year and another 50 in 24-25 if he wants it. Like he doesn't need money anymore, but like that's like $100-ish million that is just there. And it's to do a thing you like to do anyway. I think I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually. It really just, it comes down to like what level of play is he comfortable like displaying to the world, like how interested is he in continuing to play if he's like the 50th best player in the league or something like that. Like I can understand where if he feels like that's where he is, like maybe you don't want the Jordan Wizards like kind of look towards the end. But he's an all NBA level player still. And like, he can be the second best player on a contender. Like that's what sometimes he was the best player on a contender this year. They were one of the final 4 teams. Like, I think he's got at least a couple more years of, being in consideration for an all NBA spot. So it's hard to imagine that he's at that, like, that's the reason, like you're not embarrassing himself, but like doesn't want to tarnish the legacy that he's made by like kind of limping to the finish. That's not where we are yet.
No, and I would agree with you there. My favorite one is that said he had to play with D'Angelo Russell and it drove him into retirement.
I want to ask about D'Angelo Russell. Like, we don't need to do the full postmortem, but like, is he back? Is he back?
But I wanted to wrap up on the LeBron stuff. Is I like the idea. Well, actually, I found this funny. Is that people said he didn't want Melo to have his day, like Carmelo Anthony retires, and he didn't want Melo to, and also just he couldn't deal. Like he needed to make sure that he was going to be a headline for the next few days as we were getting ready for Nuggets Heat. But I also like the idea of it being, and this progresses into the larger discussion of D'Angelo Russell, their own free agents, that he wants to continue to apply pressure to the organization to make upgrades rather than say, okay, well, you traded a first round pick and you could bring everybody back. And I find it hysterical that favorable reporting for the Lakers is they're going to do anything they can to bring back Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves when it's the only thing they need to do is match whatever contract offer those guys receive. Right. That's literally all they need to do. So, and I mean, I think if I had to vote, the money certainly matters, but I would think that this is more of a scare tactic or a chess move on LeBron's part. And by the way, we didn't mention this, playing on like 1 foot basically. And so like he's probably confronting the idea of, do I need surgery that's gonna could he miss a bunch of time next season? That might also factor into this too.
I think the main reason is like he felt like shit like after that game because he gave everything he had and this season was hard and the Lakers did not win a lot. There's a tough regular season. He got hurt again. Like that's what this was, but it's more so than the news cycle domination and whatever else. But yeah, it's just like wrong time to ask him something like that. So Hachimura and Reeves have to be back, right? Whatever it costs, they have to bring both. The most they can offer Reeves is 51 million over 4, something like that, but they can match up to whatever he can get, which is into the
I'm just
90s.
like, what team is going to poison pill him? Maybe Utah or would Utah or San Antonio even do that?
I think it would be stupid just because they're going to match. I guess maybe if you want to stick it to the Lakers, but
if you know they're going to match, I'm more inclined to do it.
Well, but it's like you're tying up your resources a little bit too, right? Like it's not just, I guess maybe not. I don't know. That he has to be back. Reeves has to be back. You can't, like, if any of LeBron's, like, I'm not sure about retiring talk had to do with like applying pressure to the Lakers, you can't let, above all else, you can't let Reeves get away because you're not willing to spend what it takes to match an offer sheet like that. If that happens, I mean, like, what's your alternative as the Lakers? Like, where are you going to replace him in free agency? How are you going to do that? And then what do you say to LeBron? Like, what incentive are you giving him that because you're running out of assets? You traded one of those first, so you don't have like an endless supply of other assets to make another, mid-season overhaul.
And the other thing here, though, is I did want to add, because it gets into, yes, you could say Reeves and Hachimura need to be back, and Reeves' cap hold is so small that that's fine. Whatever. Does how this postseason unfolded make it more or less appealing to go the cap space route, which would basically be you could keep Reeves, AD, LeBron, Vanderbilt, and Max Christie, and like you're still not going to get to $30 million in room, because you could, if you're going to get rid of Vanderbilt, like you better trade him. You better not just waive him. But like Malik Beasley has that team option. D'Lo's a free agent. We just said Rui Hachimura's a free agent. Their cap holds are also enormous. And I'm just curious. Yeah, we talked about Rui being important to this team. How much do you actually want to pay Rui Hachimura moving forward? And like, has it made it more appealing or less appealing? Like, I'll just repeat the question that I had, to go the cap space route after watching this postseason, seeing how these playoffs ended for them.
So who's worth it out there for what if you say you could clear about 30? Is that's like the conservative, like,
that's the max number
that's the aggressive estimate, 30-ish.
Right.
Who's worth that? That's going to be better than kind of keeping most of the band together. Everyone's going to say Kyrie, but like, it seems like he's got a handshake deal with Dallas that's going to be for much more than that. So I don't know. I don't think it is worth it to go the cap space route. I think like a D'Angelo Russell sign and trade, is that something like, is that your real tool? Like, I'm not sure, because I don't know how in demand Russell's going to be. I just think you probably don't want him back at what it might cost to keep him. And so you should try to turn that into something else. But it's been a wild ride with D'Angelo Russell.
And trade him to Washington to get Kuzma back.
You could. I mean, like,
I don't know why the Wizards would necessarily do that. I know they need a point guard, but
yeah, that's the thing. I don't know what the sign and trade market for Russell is. Like, it's just,
I don't know what the market for Russell is. I mean, I'm not trying to.
There are not a lot of point guards out there. So like he does have that working in his favor. There's not a lot of available free agent point guards that are like, if you take Irving out of the picture, which I think probably we should, like, it's kind of him, it's Van Vliet. Then you're into like, I mean, I'm just going to look at it here so I don't forget somebody. I mean, Patrick Beverly, Westbrook,
like Gabe Vincent territories. Gabe Vincent and Trey Jones, like after Kyrie and Van Vliet, are those the next best point guards?
Yeah, they can go the cap space route, but only if they sign Gabe Vincent for for $10 million a year.
I'm just curious to see what D'Angelo's market will be, because you go through the teams that have space. Houston's not going to go after D'Angelo Russell.
No.
Utah's not going to go after D'Angelo Russell.
Indiana's not going
to go after
Detroit's
D'Angelo
not
Russell.
doing it.
What'd you say? What was the last one?
Indy and Detroit are not doing it.
The Spurs probably aren't going to do it, even though I think we were doing a quick exercise, and you said the Spurs would be a good fit for D'Lo. I think I agreed too. We might have been.
Boy,
this is pre-postseason, pre-Wemby as well too. Obviously, it's like I don't know where his offer is going to come. So maybe the sign and trade market actually might be your best bet, because would there be a team that's like, we're not going to send you a bunch, but like, here's just like, I don't know why would they help out each other, but like, would the Celtics consider, we need D'Angelo Russell shot creation over having Marcus Smart or Derek White or Malcolm Brogdon? Like, is that even too much? One of those players too much of a price to pay for him?
Where are you? So I think we've had a little bit of a disagreement on Russell. I've kind of just been like they when I mean, Stefan Stojic, D'Lo is a future Guangzhou Tiger. I mean, that's him and Dylan Brooks and Jordan Poole, I guess, according to Twitter. I've always been a little lower on Poole, on almost Freudian slip said Poole on D'Lo than
Finally.
some. Where are you on him? Like, how interested are you? Not to just your teams that need point guards: Washington, Orlando. I don't know. We've mentioned several others. The Spurs. Like, are you comfortable with him as a starting point guard at like a starting point guard salary? So let's say, I mean, he made a lot this year, but let's say you have to pay him $30 million.
No.
That's just not. That's just not what you want. Especially like he's been an all-star. He can run a pick and roll. He's a clever shot creator. He had real moments in these playoffs, timely shooting, all this other stuff. But just like, the Lakers being worried about losing him bespeaks a little selfishness. He doesn't defend. Like, is he an asset in a sign and trade? Like, it might be the only way the Lakers can really do something short of the cap space route, which is super risky. I don't know how valuable how coveted he is, even by teams that clearly need a point guard.
I'm wondering, would Brooklyn consider reuniting? And like maybe the number is just smaller. That like, is it $20 million a year? I'm exponentially more comfortable. With him at that number.
Everything changes then. But he's still the same type of player where it's like, I'm not sure he wants to come off the bench. Whereas like this happens all the time. If he were your sixth man that like came off the bench and ran the offense against backups at $20 million a year, which is a little high for that role, like that's the optimal role. That's what he could really excel at, I think. And it doesn't seem like he's interested in that, which makes it much more complicated to find him a suitor,
I do think what also makes this, and by the way, there's a report, I can't see where it came from, that the Lakers are prepared to make a trade offer for Trae Young. They can offer 1 first-round pick and salary.
Good luck.
Yeah. So, which is wild that people could. I don't understand the point of reporting this stuff when it's just so implausible.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I think when you look at it, you could say, okay, well, you might as well just keep these players and then you can try and futz and fiddle on the trade market. You can deal 1 first-round pick because you gave the 2027 one up. You can deal 1 first-round pick and you could swaps, but 1 first-round pick. And like now, what is Malik Beasley's value after he devolved into unplayable for you? And so I do think that's what makes it tough, is that it looked a lot better to just bring everyone back and you could make these moves on the margins. Is Rui movable on his next deal? Is Austin Reeves movable on his next deal? I tend to agree that with you that you have to kind of just run this back and you can try and futz and fiddle from there, or just hope that you're better after having a whole season. Like maybe D'Angelo Russell's just a better fit next year after going through a training camp. I think that the flexibility route might hold more appeal, because like, I don't know that you can hope to reach this apex again with this group. Like, you just made it to the conference finals. You got trucked, but you did make it to the conference finals. I don't know if that door with this group is going to be open again, because they still need, if you bring these guys back, and you're probably going to lose Lonnie Walker the 4th this offseason, by the way, and he became fairly important to your rotation. You still need shooting. You still need like wings. And now they're not a team that I think needs to concern themselves about this. Like, they'll have their mini mid-level exception if they bring everybody back, unless they just pay everyone up the wazoo and their payroll really inflates. Like, who are you getting for the mini mid-level? Like, do you even get a Josh Richardson for the mini Emily? I don't know.
Couldn't they get into the bad contract business if you took Beasley and Bamba's salaries? Bamba's got a non-guarantee for 10.3 and Beasley's got the team option for just under 16.5. You put those two together with the pick, and you maybe it's even hard to find another sizable salary that's going to be on the books to trade. They really don't have one. So you're talking like 27-ish million with a first round pick attached. Is there a bad contract out there you could, or like a distressed asset type of player you could get back?
Well, I was going to say, if those are all expiring, can you go to the realm of just like, if you offered that to Dallas, would they give you Tim Hardaway Jr.? Do you think he's enough of an upgrade over?
That's the thing. Beasley? If you could get up to like 40, if you had, which is hard to do, nobody has like $40 million in non-guarantees and whatever to cobble together with a pick attached. Like, then Tobias Harris. I don't know. The Sixers want cap relief, like Ben Simmons, or there's like that kind of like really wild bad contract stuff. But under 30 million with a first rounder attached, like Tim Hardaway might be about as good as you can do. So even that route's like,
I think you could do better than Tim Hardaway.
How much better? Like, I'm trying to think.
Well, he's owed like $34 million over the next 2 years. Like, that's a net negative contract. So I don't even know if you need to give up the first rounder in that instance. But like, does that offer? Let's do this. Does that offer get you Bojan Bogdanovic? And you don't need to give up that much salary. So it'd be like Malik Beasley and the first for Bojan Bogdanovic. And then if you're re-signing Rui and you're the Lakers, do you even do that? I mean, Bojan just had such an incredible season that maybe you do. But
I think you do. I don't think Detroit. I mean, I think Detroit. So it's a 29 first, right? So like, there's upside to that pick, but that's so far out. Like, it's really hard to sell that. Like, basically, you're trading like a decent player. That's why I keep thinking it's got to be just a bad contract, and you just hope that you're buying at the absolute nadir of someone's value.
Well, this kind of, I don't know why you would keep Russell then, but can you get to the money? And they could, in theory, Chris Paul from Phoenix.
Yeah. I mean, that's the type of thing you'd have to do where it's like, this could go real bad. And we just gave up our I assume you'd have to use the pick there. Cause although like, I don't know. I don't think Bamba has any value, but Beasley might have some value in Phoenix. He's kind of like Terrence Rossi, and they played him a lot. So I don't know.
Yeah. I just don't know what the move for them improving is. I think I'm with you that you have to kind of bring everyone back, and then hopefully some of those deals age into tradable assets, and then you can maybe hit like home runs on the mini MLE and your minimums, like do better than getting a Troy Brown Jr. here. But I'm kind of fascinated by what they do. My point being, I don't think they have a big move left in them.
And look, like, this was a good team after they made the trades.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much like, well, if they run it back, they're going to struggle in as the 7th seed and hope to avoid, injuries to Davis and LeBron and load management and stuff, that you price that in a little bit. But if you run it back with this team, I think your expectation should probably be like, you're trying to get a top 4 seed, and it's not unrealistic because they played that well when they had everybody, available that was in the rotation, down the stretch of the season post trade deadline. So like, it feels underwhelming, and it's always like, well, this is clearly won't be enough because they just got swept. They might've just got swept by the eventual champion, and their best players were worn down because they just had to do too much, especially early in the season for what was then a go nowhere team. Like, there is upside actually if you just bring everyone back. I mean, it'll cost a ton, but you're the Lakers, and like, this is LeBron. If you get LeBron back, like, this might be his last realistic shot. So I think it always feels underwhelming to say just, the same group, but that's probably the way to go.
Is there any scenario where this ends with LeBron trying to angle for his own exit via trade?
I thought about that too. Because I was like, because I had forgotten. I thought, well, maybe he's got to play. Like, can he opt out this summer? No, he cannot. That's next year. Like, where would he, like, what? See, he would, if he were to do that, the money's too big. He can't get anywhere that would be able to acquire him without giving up so much that it would knock them down a peg in like the contender hierarchy. So then what would be the point?
Into Houston's cap space.
He's never played with James Harden. Maybe yeah, no, I don't know how that would work. Because if he could opt out, then it's very interesting, but that's not how it's going to work.
Klay Thompson for LeBron, is that going to be on the table at all?
Klay Thompson has always loved the Lakers. The Lakers just watched him miss every shot he took for a whole series too, though. I'm not sure how interested they'd be.
Before we get out of here, do you have any thoughts on Carmelo Anthony retiring? And I know that you have thoughts because you texted me something that I thought was incredibly spicy, and I won't air it out here, but if you want the chance to say.
I mean, so in a little bit of the D'Lo mold, I was always kind of lower on Carmelo than consensus, I guess, or maybe than, like, I don't know, than most people. But to me, so my take is basically that, like, he is a Hall of Famer because that was what we were talking about. But I think he's going to go in as kind of like the last. There aren't going to be a lot more Carmelo types. I don't think he'll be kind of the last of his kind. And what I mean is just that the book on him is basically that he was an absolute bucket. Like, I think the end of his career really overshadows like how difficult he was to guard early when he was still really athletic and strong and could just, you know, he could get to the basket like crazy. He had the mid-range game, just all the one dribble stuff. He was super hard to keep, out of the lane, and was just incredibly skilled, strong, like just great scorer. But not always the most efficient, and didn't bring it defensively, and didn't probably make other players that much better. But he got a massively high volume role, which just like that doesn't happen anymore. I guess like it's not even fair to compare him to like DeRozan, because DeRozan is like very efficient and Carmelo just really wasn't. Part of that's an era thing. Like if he'd played his whole career starting now, he would have shot like a zillion threes and probably been a more efficient player like everybody. But yeah, I think just teams getting smarter about like what good offense is are not going to empower a player like him to play as large of a role as he got to play for most of his career. So like, I think he, for his era, was a great offensive player and should be honored as such and get into the Hall of Fame and all that stuff. But like, there won't be more Carmelo Anthony's. I don't think the league has like the stomach for that type of offensive player going forward, unless the rules change or something crazy happens. But that's kind of my take on it, is like, he's an interesting data point in like the evolution of NBA basketball over the last 20 years, because he was just a different type of player than we value today.
I would agree. I'm just curious as to like, would Carmelo Anthony even be like Carmelo Anthony if he came into the NBA today, where it's, we saw him, it happened later than you would want it to, but like you already mentioned, him shooting more threes, him playing the 4 earlier would certainly have been on the table. And then also, I think Olympics Melo never really appeared in the NBA just because it's so different. He was never going to play with that many stars. But like, would he have adapted his game more? Would teams have been quicker to shoehorn him into the number 2 role rather than viewing him as the number 1? And so I guess I'm a little bit higher. I was probably always a little bit higher on him, and shocker, I was a Knicks fan. Is that really like just surprising that I would have been higher on him than you? But that's where I always sort of landed on him, is I thought there was more of his game to tap into, and that he was just emboldened and enabled not to for so much of his career. And that because of what we know now, he would have been forced to follow a different trajectory. Where does he make as many all NBA teams? I don't know. I could certainly see it. I mean, like, and not for nothing, by the way, like this is someone who's 9th in scoring
right
all time. That's a big deal. And I don't think he made 6 all NBA teams, 10 all-star teams. That doesn't happen by mistake. And you could quibble over whether you think he's a top 75 player of all time. Like, he did make that list. I just think that Melo could thrive in today's NBA, maybe even possibly be a better version of himself, if only by force. I would agree with you that the way that he, especially early on, his offense, how that was generated, that's just something we're not going to see anymore. Or at least I wouldn't think.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you were going to let anybody just like cook from the elbows and, shoot contested jumpers, he'd be on the very short list of guys that the DeRozans and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, he's good at this. This is okay. It's a bad shot for most people, but he's so overwhelming at his peak that like, you just deal with it. And he does have like the, what we would think of now as kind of the ideal combo forward size, but the defense isn't there. I think that's where that's part of like the last of his kind thing, is like, if you have that frame and you're not a really good, or at least a capable defender, and maybe he would have been if he'd needed to be, because it always, like, physically he had the tools to be a good defender if that had been a priority. And maybe it would have now, because he just would not get to play if he didn't compete as much on that end. But that's an interesting aspect of it, is like the demands of a player with his like frame are just way different now than they were, certainly for the first 10 years of his career.
This is the final question for you, though. I think this is really a thinker. I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you so you can just digest it. I saw it was tweeted by SportsCenter. Which number 15 goes into the rafters? Carmelo Anthony or Jokic?
That's tough. I mean, should be both, but sorry. Like we just spent the first 20 minutes of this talking about how Jokic is the best player of his era. So
I get why stuff like that is. We actually had a conversation about this in Discord. That's why you should all join our Discord. Very about the coverage of the league but just like I know why it's out there, but I hate seeing the timing of it because all that serves to do is diminish Carmelo Anthony's legacy. True. Because no, it shouldn't be. If you had to choose between one, no, it's not going to be Carmelo Anthony because it should be and will be Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, that's tough. Tough timing on the tweet for Melo.
So there's that, and then LeBron couldn't even let Melo has his day. Melo retires, and LeBron starts hinting at retirement.
Yeah,
by the way, I'm not ready just to see that. I know Melo wasn't in the league this year, but like that 2003 draft class is not being. I'm not ready. I'm not ready for it.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, Darko Milicic was really young. He could make it back. Like he's probably still got some years in him. I don't know.
Fingers crossed that happens.
Yeah, someday.
Do you want? All right,
well, I'll take us out if you're ready. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching the stream. If you have not done so already, as Dan mentioned at the top, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, give us 5 stars anywhere you're listening to your podcast. Buy some merch so you too can be thermonuclear AF and fueled by caffeine, no dip threes. You can apologize to Mitchell Rob. There's just like so many ways you can support the podcast. And as this is key, size up. Dan said it. If you're a medium, buy a large. If you're a large, buy an XL. These are going to shrink on you, and they come a little small. Stickers and cups and all this other stuff, normal size. Don't need to buy giant ones of those. They will not.
I get one extra large mug, please.
I'd like a 64-ounce coffee mug.
I'd like a goblet. Do we have HardwoodKnocks goblets?
Can we get a goblet?
I'll look into it.
We should look into that. Follow us on our socials, Twitter and TikTok at HardwoodKnocks, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. And yeah, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody you know to build our subscriber base and keep making it possible for you to get sweet merch and incredible basketball takes and also bad ones. And yeah, so I don't know who to apologize to. I guess I'm going to go back to the original and shout out Frank Ntilikina and also apologize to the one and only Jared Allen.